Alright guys, this is it, the new deck guide for my new Aggro Shadow Isles deck that I've been playing on stream for the past several days now. If you watch my stream over at twitch.tv/swimstream, you'll be very familiar with this deck already. We have a very high win rate with it, and I'm confident this is a tier 1 deck. It is an aggro deck, and effectively the spiritual successor to the old Nox PNZ burn deck, although it does play fairly differently. Overall, it's a really good deck for climbing ladder right now. This is probably, if I was to try to climb to Masters on an alt right now, which I might do again, this is the deck I would use. Straight up, it's very fast. You're going to have a high win rate. A lot of people aren't expecting it, at least at the current moment, although it'll probably see a lot of ladder play rate in the next several days, and that's because it's a nutty deck. All right, but yeah, if you're looking to climb to Masters right now very quickly, this is, I would say, by far your best choice. Alright, so to start us off, I'm going to go ahead and point out that, as always, you should check the pinned comment for the link to Mobalytics version of this deck, because I will be keeping that one updated, so by the time you're watching this video, there might already be 1 or 2 changes to this list, so go check that out, and that's also how you can import this deck. Next, let's break this deck down a little bit. So why does this deck work now? Well, this has actually been a concept that's been attempted for a while in the past. The idea of, like, Keeper Noxus aggro. This has been experimented, like, it's a very old concept. I've experimented with it on like 3 different patches. I know some others that have. It's seen incarnations with Vlad. It's seen incarnations with just like old spiders, like some versions of like Spider Synergy were trying to like slide in like the Keeper. And of course that's because Keeper has some pretty sweet synergy with Transfusion in some cases, right? Sometimes Vlad. And now of course the new cards, Fervor and Demolitionist. There's some tie-ins there. But why is it working now? Well, it's working now because there's all these new, okay, we got a bunch of new tools. That was like a month ago in the Bilgewater expansion, but there were some really OP things that were keeping this sort of concept kind of like away from playability, right? And mostly that would be stuff like the PNZ version of Burn was probably better than this. This does play for a fairly different style, which I'll be breaking down before we jump into some, like, Master Ladder games. But for the most part, this is a very powerful style that just kind of hasn't been able to be unlocked. Also, Kalista was kind of buffed. It wasn't that recently right now, but it was like before the Bilgewater expansion, and she hasn't really been able to see play in decks since then. And then of course we've got, new tools in terms of kind of enabling the Keeper combo. Most notably, we've got stuff like Blighted Caretaker, which is really good with this in Kalista. We've got Demolitionist. The ability to use Demolitionist on Keeper in a pinch is really powerful. These are 2 cards that are absolutely insane in 90% of cases. Their median value is ridiculous, but in like 10 or 15% of states, they'll brick out, right? So their mean value tanks because of that. And what that means is that these 2 are cards that are sort of balanced around that brick condition, but both of them unbrick each other when you draw both of them, which is really powerful, because of course Keeper, when you don't have a way to kill a unit, is terrible, and Demolitionist, when you can't play her or don't have a unit that you even want to deal damage to, is quite unplayable too. Of course, I should point out that you don't really want to be doing that in most cases. It's just like if you have nothing better to use them on than each other, it ends up kind of like salvaging what would normally be kind of an auto-lose hand, actually. And the rest of the deck plays out fairly straightforward. So a couple of points right now. You might look at this, and I saw some people saying, well, isn't this just spiders? It's a very different deck from spiders. Like the old school spiders were running cards like House Spider. They were running cards like Crowd Favorite, which we're not running here. It's like more swarmy. Draven, that's not how you spell Draven. Draven and Vision to some degree, or like the Darius versions. It's a different deck that's going to be playing for a different playstyle. Overall, what I would say is that it's been sort of like right now more than ever, but I think this has been historically true in Runeterra overall, that aggro decks in Runeterra need to exist with a transition into some like effective over-the-top cards. Over-the-top basically being when your opponent has stabilized the board, you still have the ability to finish them off over low Nexus health. This is in the form of like direct damage to Nexus, like burn tools in our deck that's going to be Decimate and Noxian Fervor, but we can also include elusives into that kind of concept as well. Arguably fearsome sometimes. Although that one's a little bit iffy. But basically the way aggro should be played in Runeterra in most cases is a strong, like, early game punch through. You know, you play for the board, play really aggressive tempo tools, like, you know, these value one drops or like Keeper Butcher combo. And then when your opponent has control of the board, you shift to an over-the-top game plan and just kill them before they can kill you. This has proven to be kind of the strongest way to play aggro in Runeterra overall. And different decks will do this at different timings. Like, when you look at the old Noxus PNZ burn deck, do I have that saved somewhere? Yeah, it's like this. This is sort of like a, you know, an effective version of that. When you look at a deck like this, it transitions out of that on like turn 3. Literally, it's like, you know, you play your one drops. These are pretty much going to hit face like once or twice. That's all they're there for. And then after turn literally 3, you're just going straight to face. And sometimes your cards will, sometimes your units will be able to go combat to face after turn 3, but you don't build or play to expect that to happen, and that's a really, really big difference, right? This deck is doing the same thing but a little bit slower. You're not really like giving up control of the board until, you know, turn 6 or 5 or 6 usually, and then, you know, you're killing them with Decimate and Fervor as well as Demolitionist Disciple. And this is what fundamentally differentiates this concept from Spiders, which was playing stuff like Darius, which is fairly powerful but can be dealt with in some ways, most notably Will of Ionia being the biggest way. And that's one of the big differences there, by the way. The kind of like sort of like will dominated meta that we find ourselves in makes that kind of like unit based combat finisher a lot weaker. But there's also just like anti-swarm cards like Withering Wail we're much less vulnerable to here, because we have, you know, the Disciple, which damages them, and most importantly, we don't really have a lot of cards Wail kills. Like, you can stop a Caretaker Swarm, but usually you're like just damaging Disciple and hurting yourself as well, or leveling up Kalista. So there's not really weaknesses we're opening ourselves up to in those departments, and that's why this deck is so powerful. Overall, I would say it is a fairly easy deck to play. I don't think this is hard, although the mulligans are a little tricky, so stay with me for that because we're gonna need to break them down. It's pretty cheap to build. You can run it with just like 2 Kalistas. You don't necessarily need to like rushcraft the 3rd Kalista, but overall, yeah, and it's using Kalista, which is one of the starter champions as well. So it's definitely a deck that I would recommend to anyone. I don't think it's like, I know that aggro has this reputation for being completely brainless as a concept. I think that reputation stems almost entirely from Hearthstone. It can be true in certain decks and certain metas, but control can also be very easy. It just depends on the deck. This is, I would say, it's not a difficult deck to play, but it's not necessarily super easy. There's a lot of decisions you will have to make, and you can definitely, there's a lot of skill expression opportunities as a player here, and mulligan in this deck is going to be a really big one of those. So right before we jump into our games, let me finally touch on how that's going to work. So overall, we've got this kind of dichotomy of like core cards and like support combo cards, right? There's combo pieces, which is like we've got Keeper, which combos with Butcher, and then, you know, combos with Blighted Caretaker, and then you can even combo with stuff like Demolitionist, Transfusion, or Fervor. Bit of an awkwardness between Keeper and Transfusion, by the way. It looks really sweet, but because you have to, if you want to pop the Transfusion for your Keeper, you have to do it pre-attack if you're doing it on offense, which means you have to pre-commit the buff so that you can't get like surprise value. Your opponent will be able to react to where the buff is, and that makes it more awkward than it probably seems. You often don't want to be using Transfusion on Keeper, although sometimes you do, and sometimes it works out very well. But yeah, that's another combo. Of course, you've got, you know, stuff like Caretaker Kalista. It's like, or just other things Kalista. There's a lot of things that are leveling Kalista here. And then, of course, you've got the Disciple tree, which is, you know, Disciple is comboing with Transfusion. That's a really important combo. Demolitionist, you usually play that a little bit later, and those are other combos there. And basically, the number one rule about those combos is that you've got the combo support and the combo core. Keeper and Disciple are core. You keep these cards in your opening hand no matter what. Whereas the support cards, you only keep if you have the card they link to. So Butcher, I would pretty much only ever keep if I had Keeper. I could see some weird hands where I might keep it with Aristocrat if I'm attacking on turn 1 in the right matchup. You know, cards like Caretaker, again, I would only keep if I had Keeper. And Transfusion, I'm only keeping if I have Disciple. Demolitionist, I'm pretty much only keeping if I have Disciple, although, yeah, I don't think I would keep Demo Keeper the way this deck is built. And of course, you're kicking these late game tools. But that's the mulligan in a nutshell. So that's kind of where I see most people make the mistake. People will be keeping Butcher when they shouldn't. People might be inclined to like keep cards like Demolitionist when they shouldn't. I would pretty much never keep this card without a Disciple. And you can mulligan fairly aggressively. I actually are semi-often mulligan Kalista. It kind of depends on my opening hand. But you really want to make sure you're getting the combos, because that's how this deck wins. When you get like Keeper Butcher, you're nuts. When you get Disciple Transfusion, you're nuts. So you should mulligan sort of like it's a combo deck, because it is, yeah, it's an aggro combo deck. You do need your cards to pair off with each other. Okay, now since this is such a new archetype, I can't really talk about win rate stats. I made the claim that I think this deck is tier 1, and you know, I can talk about like the win rate stats of similar decks. Like Aggro Freljord comes in with like really unreasonably high stats in this like past week. Literally small sample size, but literally 70%, and this is like the concept that this was sort of built upon. That being said, I mean, that's kind of meaningless here, right? This deck is too new for there to be like meaningful stats from, so I think it's tier 1. We'll have to see how that plays out. I was going to bring it to the tournament that was going to happen today at time of recording, but unfortunately the tournament got canceled, so we'll never know. But I've talked with a lot of other top players about it, and pretty much everyone agrees that it seems like a very, very solid concept. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just get into a game here. We're just going to straight, you know, I'm not going to talk anymore. We've already talked enough. And let's just go ahead and break down how this deck plays out. Okay, so pretty straightforward. We're attacking on turn 2 with Keeper Butcher, Nut Hand. We've got Demo, and we're against Misfortune Fizz. So when you're mulliganing, you always want to ask yourself, okay, what's the opponent got? What kind of deck are they playing? How fast are they playing? Fast, slow, medium, what kind of thing? It's Misfortune Fizz with Nox Bilgewater. That's an aggro deck. This is going to be like an aggro race matchup. We've got, you know, Cursed Keeper Butcher, and we're attacking on 2. So Keeper Butcher's nuts. Demo is going to be a kick from this hand. Kalista's interesting in like the aggro mirror, but I think I actually really value getting like a 1-drop here, and he might put us on the defense early, so we're going to do this instead. An interesting draw. In almost any other situation, this would actually be a nightmare draw. This is like almost like the worst draw possible, Keeper plus Transfusion given this hand. Don't really want second Keeper here. Double Kalista is also a nightmare draw. So our opening hand was great, and then we just hit like 4 just terrible cards in a row. We're going to go ahead and see how this plays out though. We do have kind of like a good board state against the Crimson. And again, like Keeper Butcher is so powerful when it goes off that it's just super crazy. So you might ask, well, Swim, if Keeper Butcher is so powerful, why hasn't this seen more play in the past? Nut draw, by the way, on Disciple. If Keeper Butcher is so powerful, then why hasn't this seen more play in the past? Well, that's a good question. I guess the easiest way for me to answer that... Ooh, are we in Kalista here? Let's play Kalista. The easiest way for me to answer that is basically by saying it's inconsistent, right? It needed additional ways to be able to hit consistency. And those ways are in the game now in the form of Blighted Caretaker, which allows Keeper to combo with other things, less reliant on Butcher, which is important because Butcher is too unreliable to be a 3 of. So you have a card Keeper, which is so powerful, but completely reliant on a card that is fundamentally unable to be a 3 of. That's what's been holding it back. But now it's got Caretaker, and it's got Demolitionist. And those are really, really, really important. So we've got 5 mana, which means, you know, that gives us some pretty sweet options here. I think, though, one play that we're getting emoted. The one play that we are likely going to want to make either way is going to be Disciple? Disciple doesn't really have a great attack here. We'll just do this. It's sort of interesting. I don't think we have a fantastic open attack. The reason for that being because he has regions that actually do have some trick opportunities, surprisingly enough. Okay, that's fine. So he'll do like Powder Monkey into Butcher, perhaps. And then if he goes for Powder Monkey into Butcher, then we've got the Transfusion, which is pretty nice. Basically, we're just giving him no blocks and being very aggressive. I think we can just move in. So we'll just go in like this. Basically, just open up with it, give him no good blocks. This is like really, really aggressive. It's big pre-commitment, but he has to just like fold out here, right? There's just nothing he can do. So yeah, that's the, I mean, like that. That's the deck. It's that. Just do that. Yeah. Overall, I wanted to talk about the build. It's really important. The idea of this deck is the reason it all works together is because all these cards are so combo dependent. They need to be pairing off with each other. So it's like they all link together in like a web, right? That's why it's able to work now and it hasn't worked before. Like Disciple was kind of an awkward, like before it was the triangle of like Disciple, Keeper, Transfusion, Butcher. I guess that's a quadrilateral, whatever. Hello. Lucian Zed. Wow, against Lucian Zed attacking odds, I'm actually going to keep Caretaker. Woo! That's crazy. I never keep this card. This is a keep hand. Look at that. We've got Hapless to sacrifice. We're attacking odds against Lucian Zed, which is like 2 champions. We're going to be racing them down, so we actually do want to clear their board. We have the ability to like double kill them. And if he plays for curve every turn, he taps under the ability for response in the form of something like Ranger's Resolve. All very, very big factors here that are going to compel us to keep having a Hapless sacrifice is the last one. I can't keep this if I don't have a sacrifice. Get an attack here for free. Nice. If he opens Strefs, then I let him attack before I play Disciple. If not, I'll just play Disciple. You can't block this. This is... just click the button. There we go. So, yeah. Basically, everything is just linking with each other. Like, Disciple is now better because of Demolitionist, and Demolitionist is better because of Disciple, and Demolitionist hits Keeper, and Keeper hits Caretaker. It all just kind of meshes perfectly together.
Let me show you what I can do.
So, he's not on amazing options here. Unfortunately, I am not either at this point. You know, we're, I don't think we're gonna get, like, the Caretaker of our dreams. We could slow play, so there's 2 plays here. We can Caretaker, clear the board, and put pressure, or we can slow play. I think we can race him down, actually. I think the pressure play is totally fine here. Like, look at this hand. This is like a racing hand if I've ever seen one. So the thing is, if he's on Zed, which there's a good chance he's on, his play is to pass back to us here. So that telegraphs a Zed, which doesn't change our play because we're still going to get it in for 5, down to 14. He'll play the Zed post, and that won't matter because he's down to 14, and we can race him with this hand. Like, look at this hand. It's so beautiful. Now, the alternative was slow playing there. Slow playing would have basically meant, okay, now we aren't going to rush him. We're going to let him develop the Zed that we put him on 3, which, by the way, he basically telegraphed he doesn't have Lucian by not playing out of 2, so no Lucian in hand. Zed, keep on opening hands here, so that puts it at like 55, 60%, about 60. Not super high odds. Not super high odds. Which means it couldn't have been worth it slow playing there. We'll take a chump block on one of them. Okay, I think that's, I guess, fine. It's better to chump block the Shadow to brick Purify, actually. Some of it doesn't really matter anymore, but back in the day, these decks were running Purify, and sometimes if you block the main one, they just turn the Shadow into a living unit that lasts forever. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna go ahead and make sure we have a board developed to just like swing out here. We sort of want him to play a 1 health unit so we can like do a Vile Butcher. This draw was bad, by the way. Butcher was nightmare draw here. So we're worried about Singular Combat. Singular Combat isn't that big of a threat here given his board state. He doesn't even pause, so he has a little bit of a hard time having it. Usually you'd have to think about that for a few more seconds if you did. So now we've got 2 options. We can take the Open Swing. Now we do have 5 spell mana and the ability to play it fast mana. I shouldn't say spell mana. You might think of these little bubbles. It's the fast mana. Like when we have fast options in our hand, that could compel us into an Open Swing here because we have the ability to, you know, react to his board state. He might get greedy and not block with Zed. In fact, he probably will. And what that means is that we can maybe just kill him over the top. Yeah, I think we are going to go ahead. I think we are going to go ahead and swing out here, actually. I think so. It's sort of interesting. I would say one of the most important tips with aggro, and remember this is very important. Ooh, he takes the safety block. He has to do this. This is the correct play on his part. It doesn't feel good for him. One of the most important tips, and remember, you do have to do this, is against like slower control decks, do not make the mistake of falling into the trap of like aggressively open attacking into them. That's the opposite of what you want to do in those kinds of matchups. You do not want to open attack. I'm talking like P&Z Ionia, like Heimer, that kind of deck, or maybe like Shadow Isles P&Z, although people don't really play that anymore. Like those kinds of decks, you don't want to be open attacking into because their options, Shadow Isles Freljord probably is an example of that too. Their biggest options are fast speed, right? And by open attacking into them, open attacking meaning first action attacking, by doing that, all you're doing is making their fast speed concepts better, right? Whereas like I think the common, I guess, perception is, oh, I'm the aggressor, so I need to be attacking, let's attack. Where it's kind of the opposite in most situations. It depends on what your opponent's playing. If your opponent is playing units, if you're aggro against like mid-range, if they're playing Demacia or deep, then open attacking can make sense. Can, not always, but that can make sense. When you're against like a deck where their scare cards are fast speed, you need to develop into that so that you get more value out of your swing, because they're going to play the fast cards no matter what anyway. That's how you need to be thinking about open attacking or not. So an interesting board state. Of course we top deck the Decim. This is, again, this is how this kind of deck plays. Oh, that's quite interesting. Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do anything here, I think.
Only the worthy survive. Shadows cut deep as any weapon.
So, interestingly enough, I mean, Kalista is, like, potentially flipping here, which does make a little bit of a difference. I don't think there's, like, necessarily a downside to letting the Zed level here. The one interesting thing here is we do have the ability to flip our Kalista on Butcher. I guess what that means is we should do this. This is a weird play. So this makes a lot of sense for a few different reasons. We're basically threatening lethal. You know, we're close to it with Decimate. We're making sure to use Fervor on the thing with more health to protect it. We're saving our other card to be sacrificed by Butcher to level up the Kalista for our attack by not blocking. And we're blocking in a way that makes single combat more awkward. No, wait, that's not right. We're blocking in a way that makes single combat. No. I blocked backwards. I was supposed to block the Zed here for the single combat. Oh, that's kind of funny. Okay. Sure, you got it, buddy.
I am the shadow. My skill is unrivaled.
It's pretty adorable. Yeah, and I guess there's not really anything to do here. Don't think so, right? Shouldn't be. Yeah, blocking the way I did was pretty bad. I was supposed to block the Zed. That's another part of the reason we're supposed to block the Zed. I don't see how it could possibly matter here, but yes, we were supposed to block the Zed. It's sort of interesting. I mean, I'm not dead at 3. Again, I don't think this is possibly losable. He has 2 mana. I can't be dead at 3. It's Ionia and Demacia. I'm just making sure I'm not being dumb, because I've already made like one bad play just now, and that could in theory lead to a situation where the game becomes losable. I don't see any weird way for that to happen. By the way, we're assuming he has deny. That, of course, because if he doesn't have deny, then our Decimate wins already. I know that. But we have to assume he has deny for exactly that reason. It's because we already beat non-deny hands that we're forced to assume he has deny, right?
Punish restraint.
That's sort of interesting. I guess there's some weird combo of something plus Relentless Pursuit that actually punishes us for swinging before playing Decimate. Okay. Again, this is like we're in like a weird closeout scenario. When you're playing aggro, you always have to like keep this kind of thing in mind. Like sometimes you're gonna be in a game that is going to a weird closeout. By the way, he shouldn't be running deny in this deck. Like the odds of him having deny hands are like 4 or 5%. probably less, because it's probably not even in the deck, and even if it is, it's low quantity, and even if it is, then he needs to have drawn it. But again, it's the only way you can possibly lose, so you have to assume he has it. By open attacking there, that's probably a slight misplay, because then there's some weird hands like Disciplines plus Relentless Pursuit that can punish me, and that's not that weird, like Repost plus Relentless Pursuit. He already played 2 Relentless Pursuits, so it starts to get weird, but I mean, it's a lose condition when we're very ahead, and when you're ahead, you want to play tight. You want to play for narrow lose conditions, respect your lose condition when you're ahead, and play for your win condition when you're behind. It's very, very important mentality. Remember all of that. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of the deck in a nutshell. It's just a fast deck. There is going to be a lot of nuance in these late game positions. Like, you are going to have to think, okay, what could my opponent have? I don't know. I think that a large part of the perception of aggro being kind of like brain dead comes from just a different framework of looking at the game. Because I think a lot of people look at card games from the standpoint of like value, and that would be sort of like almost chess-like in a way. The idea of just like, here are my resources and I'm gonna min-max these resources and take value exchanges and maybe think some turns ahead. Whereas, like, that's one way of looking at it, and it's not that it's wrong, but, like, you can also look at it sort of, like, more in, like, a poker sense, where it's, like, hand reading and playing around options. And I would say aggro probably emphasizes that sort of mentality more than Control does. And you'll see that in these games. I'll play a third one just because these games are so fast. I'm rattling through these. You'll see that in these games. I want to find one where we lose so that I can kind of like show you guys how that sort of scenario plays out and how you have to play when you're losing, or when you have a bad hand. But yeah, it's like, as the aggressor, you really have to be cognizant of answers. You have to play around outs, and you have to play very, very differently under different circumstances. So this is a good example of a hand I would full mulligan. I think a lot of like newer players might make the mistake of keeping either Kalista or Demo or both in their hand. Here, okay, so a few of the things here. Kalista's not that amazing in the opener. She's a 3-mana card. This deck curves so low, I just want to make sure I'm getting 1s and 2s. Demo's not a 2-drop. She costs 2 mana, but you don't drop her on 2. She's not a 2-drop. Right? So we're thirsty for early drops, 1 and 2. We still need a 1 and a 2. And on top of that, we have the attack token on 1, which increases the demand for 1-drops, right? And you'll see that demand has been met because of that aggressive mulligan. We now have the Hapless Butcher combo. Now, he has the 1 card in the game, in the current meta, that will stop me from doing this combo. I would normally slam a Butcher here and jam him up for 4, but against Dredgers, I think we can't do that. I'm fine, by the way, saving my Butcher for a Kalista proc on 3. And we are attacking on odds, so Kalista does kind of feel like she has bonus points. But even then, I couldn't have kept Kalista in the opening hand right there. So yeah, we've got Kalista and Vile Feast. I think that's a pretty good combo. That's nuts. Huge hit. Oh my god. Absolutely insane. Oh my god. Oh, Jesus. Oh, he's doing it. He's done it. Oh, that's gonna cost you, buddy. Holy shit. That's absolutely gigantic. Well, that's a flip. Whew. I've never had this happen before. This has actually literally never happened to me before. Dude, what the hell? So, rule of thumb, Kalista attacks on the right side. It doesn't matter when she's leveled already, really, but it's just kind of like, you know, it's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, she's summoning something pretty useless here, but whatever. She'll summon something more useful next turn. Like, he's forced to kill one of my Butchers, and he can't really deal with my Kalista in any significant way. We have a pretty dream hand right now. You know, I mean, I don't know if I'd say dream. I would like one of these to be a unit, but having like Decimate and Fervor are great. Fervor is amazing against Grasp matchups. Keep that in mind. I'm not going to be like keeping this in my opening hand against Grasp, the Shadow Isles card, but this is like the Grasp counter. It's what you need. Very interesting here. I'm going to threaten the open attack on 5. There's a lot of reasons for that potentially. Yeah. passing here is fine. There's some almost considerations to try to like fervor into the Wanderer, but that would be a little insane. So again, we have to ask ourselves, open attack or develop, right? Always the question, such an important question. You need to master this question. Open attack or develop? What do you guys think? Well, let's look at our mana. We've got 8 mana, and we have the ability to play at fast speed. We can counter a lot of things like Grasp are going to be common options for him. Usually, these kinds of decks punish you for open attacking. Deep kind of is a nice middle ground, where Deep is powerful because they have good options. They have big fat units that'll punish you for developing, but they've got big spells at fast speed that are high value, and that's going to punish you for open attacking. Here we're going to open attack, and we're going to do that because we have good spells and we don't have great development. Demo's not going to do much here. So, yeah, we get like a neutralized attack, basically. He is effectively life-stealing off of this spare Butcher to, Is there anything cheeky we can do here? If we fervor... I'm just trying to think, because the bond is weird. Because this will sacrifice this life instead of mine. There's no, like, weird way to use transfusion here. If I transfuse into this Butcher, I can potentially deal 5 damage. But then he gets a Grasp that I can't reset, which is really valuable for him. That would be... So transfusion into Butcher would keep it alive. Wow. Man, that's actually a little painful. I think I can't do anything there. That's really painful. I would love to transfusion into my Butcher, but it makes his Grasp a really good card. I don't want to give him a Grasp that we can't counter with Fervor. Maybe that's a mistake, because we already have a 4 health unit on the board, so to a degree we can't avoid it anyway. So yeah, maybe that was just wrong. We might have messed that up. It's like... We're a little behind on our clock now. Again, we need some units here, and Demo sort of doesn't count as a unit. You should think of this card sort of like as a Decimate. She doesn't really want to be played as a unit, really. She doesn't have a good, like, offensive body. She doesn't really do anything. Okay. So he's got, like, the 2 attack here. That's fine. So at this point, we need to get our Glimpse off. We really want to Disciple. He's gonna need to attack into us. I mean, we don't have a good Glimpse target, which is a nightmare. And that's because we drew 2 Butchers and no, like, good, like, Uniswarm cards. We didn't draw, like... Well, we drew 1 Hapless, but because we drew 2 Butcher's Glimpse, we're starved for, like, weak targets, right? Makes sense. Here, this is gonna be our Glimpse. The question is, do we put him on Vial? He used 1 Vial in a really loose way. There's a cheeky play where it's like, if we put him on Vial and if we assume that our Glimpse is more important than our Fervor, which it actually might be, then there's a call to, like, do a cheeky Fervor first to force the Vial and then Glimpse on the Re. I don't think that's worth it. I don't think that makes any sense at all, and we've got Transfusion as, like, an anti-Vial anyway. Need to be hitting a Disciple off of this would basically end the game. Even if we don't hit Disciple, we have good options on Glimpse. Decimate's good. This is kind of the point of this deck. Own the board early, and then just make sure you're drawing into your burn tools late, right? Now, this is kind of awkward, because I don't even know if I want to be drawing into these tools right now. I might want to be drawing into units instead. I don't know. But it's fine. Down a Whale. Yeah, we kind of have to set up for a swing. This is just going to be our best chance here. It's pretty hard for him to have Vile Feast. He used it really loosely before, which could indicate you have a second one. When you use a card in a loose way, it's like... it's sort of weird, because they've used the first copy, right? Which means the probability dictates it's less likely for them to have second copy, but the loose usage telegraphs that they're more likely to have the second copy, so it's very interpretable. Depending on whether you're prioritizing the math or the read, different people will come to very different conclusions about the likelihood of the second copy on a loose usage like that. So yeah, I'll put Kalista on the right. Again, I'm just doing this to develop and show good habits, just because unleveled Kalista should usually be on the right side. She's leveled, so it doesn't matter here, but that's because the combat resolves left to right, so she can sometimes level during combat. And yeah, we've got a good enough hand to close this out, typically. This game is not going as well as it should be. We drew really awkwardly a few turns in a row, so we'll see. So here, I think we are going to Transfusion into Kalista to threaten the eye. This could force out a response. The main thing we're looking for is to like bait grasp. I think this has a decent chance of accomplishing that. We have like this reactive hand that we just want to be turning on, basically. Our lose condition is stuff like grasp. He could even have like, you know, vile feast off the top, stuff like that. So we want to respect those lose conditions. Okay. We kill the eye. And by the way, when you're playing an aggro deck, this type of aggro where your top end is burn, you're not killing with Darius, but you're killing with burn, it's really important to realize that once you've lost control of the board, again, you're transitioned. You're into a burn strategy at that point, right? So once you're at this point where you've kind of like, wow, this is sort of weird. I don't know. That transfusion might have been wrong. We really do need it to have like one more damage on his Nexus now. Oh well. But yeah, you're transitioning your strategy like halfway through the game. So right now, our priority is actually just to stay alive. We're playing defensive. Every turn we can stall him is a turn that we get an extra draw into things that are going to kill him over the top, right? So it's like having cards like Hapless Aristocrat at these stages of the game can actually be good. If it buys you an extra turn, then it can give you like a notable win rate chunk. That doesn't always happen like that, but just keep that in mind. Yeah, this game sort of fizzled out. I think we made 2 or so misplays that are probably going to end up costing us here. He did tap under, and tapping under should kind of just mean we're good. Like, there shouldn't really be big re-responses here. I don't imagine. So you have to think of the scare card, right? It's like, how do we beat a Vile Feast right now? It looks like there's no... It looks like there's no way for this hand to beat a Vile Feast, which is really sad. But the way he's playing makes it really hard for him to have Vile Feast, like really hard. And I don't think there's other scare cards he could have. Some of these decks run Make It Rain. Yeah, I think I'll just move in here. I think this is fine. It's like he had to have just drawn it. He didn't have it. It has to be this card on the left if he has it. And he's already played 1, so he's got 2 in his deck. I haven't been watching the tosses. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Watching the tosses does majorly affect the probability, especially if you put them on a specific number of copies of Vile Feasts. Overall, it's fine. But I think that that's a good game to show you guys because A, it shows a kind of awkward hand. Now you might say, well, Swim, that hand was really crazy. What happened on turn 3? That hand was not as good. Like, it was really funny what happened on turn 3, and it was just like a 3-card combo that could have been good in a slightly different board state. Our Kalista resed a Spider, which didn't really end up doing anything. Like, we got her flipped really early, but our hand sucked, right? That's a good game to showcase because it shows you guys how the deck plays when it has a bad hand, and it also shows you some of the like nuance of how you have to think as like the aggressor, because there is a lot of like sort of transitioning strategies and playing around with different things and making sure you're respecting options. Like, for example, it looked like we had a transfusion earlier, but if I had transfused and my Butcher goes up to 4 health and that gives him a grasp on a 4 health unit that I really want to, at least at that point in time, and this might have been a misplay, but at that point in time I was thinking I need to basically just not give him a good grasp, because if I let him grasp a 4 health unit, then I can't counter with Fervor, and that's really big because Fervor countering grasp is so huge. Like, you just need, because normally you don't play any 4 health units, right? Unless Kalista levels, and you often can't even really use grasp on her. Like, normally you don't play 4 health units. And which means that you can always counter Fervor and just delete the entire grasp target, and that's really, really big. But yeah, that's kind of how the deck plays in a nutshell. Super powerful list. It'll do very well for you, but it is important to have followed these steps, because this is a list. I'm not going to call this hard. It's not like a brain surgery list, but you do need to understand how the list kind of plays at different timings. And you need to understand how to like mulligan, because I see a lot of people misplaying this list. People will mulligan, just kind of like, they'll keep stuff like Butcher because it's like 0 mana, which you really don't want to be doing. Or they'll kind of like kick a little too greedily in some cases, or a little too safely in others. Overall, super powerful list. I think it's easily tier 1. I'm going to be bringing it to the next tournament next week. I'm very, very, very proud of this concept finally sort of like having the right meta situation to work. So yeah, this is a list I would recommend to everyone. It's a really good list to climb to Masters right now if you're looking for it. This is just like a great deck, and of course it climbs games very quickly, which is what you want in any sort of climbing deck. So amazing laddering deck. Yeah, it'll do very well for all of you guys. I hope you made it this far in the video. Congrats if you did. I know that most of the people that watch these kinds of videos probably just like literally they'll watch it, they'll watch the first 30 seconds, they'll realize that it's a long ass intro from a guy who just seems like he really likes to hear himself talk, and then it's like, where's the gameplay? They'll skip to the gameplay, they'll watch half a game, and they'll be like, yeah, this deck looks neat, and then they'll net deck it, and then they'll fuck it up and then blame the net decker. It's like, so you guys that have made it to this part of the video, that's good, because you're gonna have a significant advantage on the competition who's just gonna be blindly playing this deck and not playing it right at all. Okay, which is a shame, because it's not a hard deck. It's just like some of the decisions might be slightly counterintuitive at first, but you know, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, good deck, play it. That's about it for me. Super strong, and enjoy it. All right, guys, and yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time